I love that. Missed that for a year. Okay, we are reconvening the study session. This time we're going to be discussing deer management and take a regional approach, hopefully. So I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this evening, for those that are watching, this is a special study session. We don't typically have study sessions like this that are live streamed, but because of the large interest in this particular topic, we thought it was appropriate to do that, and council agreed to do that. So this evening, staff will be providing a presentation outlining the city's efforts to better understand the urban deer issue in our community. At the conclusion of our presentation, we will ask for City Council's consensus on adopting a resolution pursuing a regional approach to urban deer management in Oakland County. This resolution supports the creation of a regional collaborative effort of developing a regional deer management plan by working with state, county, and other Oakland County communities, as well as identifying funding sources to implement the plan. Over the many years that we've been studying this, and Mr. Farmer from our Special Services Department will be doing a presentation, we have got our arms around the problem, I think, pretty well. And it is absolutely a regional issue. This is not a local issue that is specific to the city of Farmington Hills, and that's why we're trying to develop this effort. And really the hope is that at the end of the day, we will generate enough interest from ourselves and our neighbors and officials at the county, strengthen numbers, as it were, to really get the attention of the Natural Resources Commission and help us out with addressing this issue. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce Brian Farmer, our Deputy Director of Special Services, to provide our presentation. Take it away, Brian.
Good evening. All right, I'm going to go through this presentation. We'll be a little bit interactive. So during different sections of it, I'll pause, and if you have any questions as part of that section, that way we can sort of keep it sort of in an organized fashion. And at the end, I'm going to share some stories. So for the residents here, you'll hear during the presentation, I'm not going to share a lot of like the stories that I've heard, but towards the conclusion of it, I will share some of the highlight stories of the concerns that our residents have. So with that, the background, it really began in 2015. Our city manager at the time, Dave Boyer, had been getting several calls. Our nature center was getting several calls. A lot of it had to do with the concern of there's a lot of deer in the area, a lot of deer vehicle crashes. People would see them laying on the side of the road. So we started getting several calls. Even years previous to that, we were getting the calls. Then in April 2015, we decided to meet with the DNR because they may have an answer of what do we do, what's the process. Around that time, Ann Arbor, if you're familiar with that, they started having a lot of concerns and issues, and they took it to their council and started to address it in different ways. So we met with the DNR, the main people with the DNR, Wildlife Division, and they expressed that we should talk to other communities having the same type of issues. Talk to Ann Arbor, talk to Oakland County Parks, who was managing deer at the time, talk to Kensington. Rochester was having some concerns. So they really directed us to talk to other communities and see what they were doing, but they really said, look at what Ann Arbor's doing. That's a good model with their community deer survey, how they've taken residents' concerns and logged them. So we took their model and started doing it the same way this way. So my role with the Department of Special Services, obviously we do programs, manage our parks, but this became a role of our department, and our role is to collect the data, not to make the decisions on what to do, because the DNR said that's more of a city council decision, but you need to collect the data first to be able to provide you the information that you need to know to see if we have a true concern or an issue with deer. So we did this. This is the data collection. We created a Farmington Hills Residence Deer Information Log, which is basically a spreadsheet that we wrote calls down on and what the concerns were. Our Nature Center did it. We have a sustainability coordinator. They started collecting it. And I took a lot of calls. And as you may know, when we get a phone call, it usually isn't a what's your concern and we hang up the phone. It's about a half hour to an hour conversation. We really wanted to listen, so we did. We took the time to really listen to see truly what are the concerns, and you'll hear some of that later. The other item that we did was Community Deer Management Survey in 2016. We did a lot of research and developed some resources for residents. You'll see more about that. We started looking at deer vehicle crash data collection. We've got those numbers. The annual aerial deer surveys that we performed starting in 2016, we've got that to share. And then we also have some information that we've shared with in networking with neighboring communities. We'll share something about that. So we've logged over 200 phone calls. I'd say nearly, but looking now, it's been over 200 phone calls, as well as emails and even in-person meetings. So we've really taken a lot of time and really heard a lot of the concerns and impacts that the deer have made in this in our community, and you're going to hear some of the concerns. This sort of sums it up. Basically, the first thing is there's too many deer. Why is that a concern? Because they start to see that the deer, they feel they're hungry, they feel threatened. The deer aren't afraid. I'll share just a couple stories now, and I was going to wait till later to share more, but even I had a person call up that was getting groceries out of their car at night, and the deer like basically was staring them down right behind him, and the guy thought, well, usually I'm carrying a sidearm, and now I feel like I should have had my sidearm, because so he turns around, he's looking at the deer, and it was the way the story was told was pretty funny, but in the end it was scary, because the deer's like big buck looking right at him, right behind him, and starts running at him, and where the deer usually in the woods, it'll run, they ran right to the woods, but basically the guy thought, am I going to get attacked? I've never in my time here been heard of a person getting attacked by a deer, but people have felt like it could have happened, or it's been close to happening. So, but it has yet to happen. But we have had calls about dogs getting attacked by deer. So, and even the dog having to get surgery from the attack. So, a lot of different stories, which I'll share a little bit more later. Landscape destruction and blight. So, a lot of neighborhood associations are starting to see that residents are not able to keep up with their yards. They basically have given up, and that's some of the calls that I've received, is that they put in thousands of dollars over the years, and these are long-term residents. Like they've been here one was 58 years, and they're calling. So it's not like this is all of a sudden people move in and saying, deer aren't part of our community and I don't want to see them. These are people that's lived here a long time, that have seen the population grow and have experienced the impact of property destruction from the deer. They know they can call somebody up, an exterminator for bugs or even squirrels and raccoons, but they call us for the deer because they're not sure what to do. They will try different chemicals on the plants. They'll try to plant different things. Everybody that I've spoken to has tried everything you can think of, and even now they're putting fences up. And again, it goes back to the neighborhood associations that don't want to see the fences up, and it doesn't make your property look nice, but they're doing everything it takes to be able to keep some kind of landscape. Ticks and Lyme disease is another one. They've seen more ticks, and they're concerned about Lyme disease. The new one that I've received that isn't on here is CWD is a major issue in the state of Michigan right now. Concern with hunters and the Department of Natural Resources and what with the prions going into the soil and never leaving. I'm starting to get calls about that. Chronic wasting disease, which could be a future major concern that we get more calls about. And then obviously personal and pet safety, which I mentioned the story earlier about the person feeling threatened, and then also pets getting, some have gotten attacked. The deer are just not as afraid as they used to be, is what I'm hearing. So we did a community deer management survey in 2016. We had 5,409 respondents. From those respondents, the majority of the respondents said they had landscape damage. That was a big concern. And then 589 people reported dead or injured deer on their property within the last 3 years. So that would have been 14, 15, 16, I would assume, when we said the last 3 years. So a lot of deer injured and reported. We continue to get those reports as well. So the deer survey, here's some examples of what was on that survey. And to help you understand the survey, it was across the city. It was put in their tax bills. So the respondents were across the city. When you'll see later on that the major impact areas, there was only really, there's 4 major areas that are really have a high population of deer. Some areas of the city, people don't see the deer. They're not having that impact. But the 4 major areas is really what you'll see later. And so when we did this survey in 2016, I would say based on the results, it's hard to really say when you have a homeowner that isn't experiencing the impacts, they might not have the same results as somebody that's really seeing a lot of the deer that's in their community or in their neighborhoods. So 1,249 people said the deer population will manage itself. And again, we had 5,409 respondents. So 1,249 said that the deer will handle it themselves. 861 people said the city's responsible. 758 said the county is responsible. And then 2,036 said the Michigan DNR should handle it on a statewide basis. So that's part of the reason why we're coming today and why we sort of suggest that approach is it be a regional approach, because our residents do feel it's a statewide issue and not just a city by city. So with the resources that we developed, we created immediately we put some basic information on our website, fhgov.com. We created a resident deer management section. Some of the resources might be what to plant in your yard. We have some videos that we shared in there. Just basic information that the DNR had shared with us and we had found in other communities that across the country really that helped residents when it came to deer concerns. We also looked at different deer management practices. We became educated on sort of the deer population and how they react in suburban communities versus rural and the more natural areas. So in 2017, City Council enacted an ordinance prohibiting deer feeding. A lot of residents were calling about concerns of people baiting the deer, putting feed in their yards. So City Council made the effort to put a ban on feeding deer. We still get calls from time to time. Our zoning department does recognize that and usually goes to the person that's feeding the deer and in friendly way, they just ask them to stop feeding the deer. They're not giving out tickets, but if it continued to be an issue, they would. But usually people have been educated on it and they stop feeding the deer. So deer vehicle crash data. Oakland County had the most deer vehicle crashes in Michigan in 2020, and even in previous years the same. So there's 1,855 deer vehicle crashes that reported in Oakland County in 2020. I can say these were reported. A lot of people hit deer and they're not reported. They just assume, hey, there's not a lot of damage, I'm just going to keep driving, I'm not going to call. So there's several people that don't report deer vehicle crashes. According to the Michigan Office of Highway Safety and Planning, deer vehicle insurance claims average $4,300. So doing the math, you'll see here, I'll share that in a second, but when you look at the amount of deer vehicle crashes, this sort of shows the whole state, and Oakland County has the most. So in Farmington Hills, over 7.5 years, this is based on what DPW picked up, total 605 deer over those 7.5 years, and you can see the increase in deer. I can only assume as you get to 2020 that it may be less traffic with COVID and less people traveling on the roads. That's why maybe those numbers decline, but you could see a steady increase from 2015 through 2019, and then again it dropped down in 2020. As of today, or as of July 21st, there was 52 deer that were picked up by DPW. Again, some deer remain not picked up. They're taken into the edge of the woods, and usually we let nature take its course. But these are the deer that were picked up by DPW. So if you do the math of over that 7.5 years, 605 dead deer, it's about $2.6 million in claims at that $4,300 average with deer vehicle crashes. So in our area, when we did the aerial deer surveys, and you're going to see a map in a second here, you can see some of the numbers, but I can say I've personally been on these aerial deer counts, and we've had a DNR representative on each one of them, and we have a GIS person that maps it out. So the way it works is we took this from the DNR in terms of the recommendation how we do it. We contacted Oakland County Parks, who initially had the contract with McMahon Helicopter Services to do the aerial deer counts. In 2016, we went to Oakland County and said, hey, can you do this for us? And they, at that time, their budget only allowed them to do it every 2 years. So that was the year they started doing that, and their contract changed. So we determined that we needed to do it ourselves. So at that time, myself, a DNR representative, and 3 others flew in the helicopter and did the deer counts. The way the deer counts are performed, you need to have snow. Usually 5 to 6 inches of snow is best, at least, to be able to spot the deer. The conditions need to be right. If the sun's out, it's different than when it's just cloudy. So there's a lot of percentages that you can say that we didn't see them all because of the different the elements and what was going on. So as you can see, 2016 we had 304 deer, 425 in 2017, 602 in 2018, and then it drops down in 2019. But if you look at 21 and 18, we had 602 deer in 18 and 729 in 2021. So you could see that was in the middle of March or middle of February, and the other times we were in early March. So you see a lesser number. So deer typically yard up, and it depends on the year too. It could be a cold winter. It could be a lot of snow on the ground. Deer start to lose their energy throughout the winter, and you could use, a lot of research in the UP says this when they start feeding the deer and they yard up because there's a lot more snow up there. So in these years, you look at the example I'm trying to get at is the middle of February, the deer were more yarded up. We've seen them in a more concentrated area. And as March goes on and deer start to be able to spread out more, and that's when they start to not yard up as much, that could be a reason why we've seen a little bit less deer. It was harder to spot smaller groups of deer, where in February we've seen larger groups of deer more yarded up together. So that could be a reason. I'm going to pause now. Is there any questions so far or any comments? Or
Anybody questions? Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate that. Got a question regarding, is the deer located in certain areas of the city? Any data in regards to where the deer is located at? We have
Yes.
4 quadrants in Farmington Hills, 36 square mile community. Where are they? Is any data to support? Is there a concentration of deer in certain areas or not?
You're going to love this. So Matt Malone is awesome, GIS coordinator amongst many other things he does. But I think he's won awards for what he does. So his mapping skills and all the other things that he's been awarded for under our Central Services Department. He's created these maps. So part of the process for the aerial deer counts was to do on an application, using technology in the helicopter, we actually plot where the deer, we call them out and they're plotted. So you'll see on these maps sort of how that works. So this is in 2021, this is in Farmington Hills, and you can see the concentrated areas are really along that 11 mile, between 10 and 11 miles, a big area, and then near Inkster and between 10 and 9 mile. It's always been, since 2016, the highest population of deer is really in that Farmington 11 mile, 10 mile area, and then Orchard Lake, between Orchard Lake and Middle Belt, around the 10 mile area, and then the southern area, south of 10 mile in the Inkster area. Over the last 5 years, that's really been the main core areas. Just this year, we've seen way more deer spread out. And actually, a lot of them started to go a little bit more south, and just so happens that I got a call from Livonia, their Parks and Rec directors, saying, what are you doing about the deer? So it's funny to see this on the map, that they're actually starting to go that way. And you'll see in another slide that they're traveling through the wooded areas and the river corridors. That's really the main way that the deer are sort of, you'll see that population, they bed in those areas, and the more, you usually don't see them in the fields or in the swamps when we're doing the aerial deer counts. You're seeing them in the woods and bedded up on hillsides, typically in the wintertime.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
I
it
live
gets
at-
better.
Yeah, I live on a 14-mile road area near Drake area, and I can see the fact data there is quite minimum in regards to deer issue.
By my house, we've got tons.
Okay, but the other question is crashes. It was about 1,855 crashes in Michigan, Oakland County.
It's Oakland County.
How many in
Just
Farmington
Oakland
Hills?
County. In Michigan,
Farmington Hills.
Joe, you remember? Oh, Farmington Hills. There was 105.
Crashes in Farmington, crashes?
105 in 2019 deer vehicle crashes that were reported. And then in 2020, 98 deer vehicle crashes, meaning that somebody called up and contacted us to say, hey, or they contacted the police to say, I was in a deer vehicle, I had hit a deer. They call somebody, and then DPW comes out and gets the deer and disposes of it.
And one last question. Had the city sought DNR analysis on our data in regards to their opinion about the deer problem in Farmington Hills?
So that's the interesting part. They will not tell any city that they have a problem.
Okay.
They will say that we have a lot of deer impacts. And that's why I think we need to take it to the next level, because there's a lot of residents that are concerned, and we're not being told we have a problem. But you'll see later in the presentation that the DNR does say that in the resolution that we proposed, that they say a healthy population is 20 or less deer per square mile. Does that say in a city or in a wooded area? They didn't say. But it's 20 or less deer per square mile is a healthy population, what you want to have. And so again, you can see in these deer counts in a second here, I'll show you. Let me talk about this, and I'll show you some of those numbers and how it breaks down. So we met with, we had another meeting in 2017. So our first meeting with the DNR was in 2015. We met again in 2017 with Novi, Southfield, a few other community representatives that we said, okay, just like you said, as the deer told us and give us analysis, we wanted them to tell us, we have a problem, we need to do something about it. They wouldn't tell us we had a problem. So we asked them to write a letter to say, okay, can you write a letter recommendation to say, we recommend you do this, and they didn't write a letter recommendation. They're very supportive, though, don't get me wrong. They're willing to do whatever it takes, and they'll support us in whatever decisions we make. They just don't want to make the decisions for us. The state doesn't want to tell each municipality what to do. For example, we have an ordinance against hunting. The DNR didn't create that ordinance, cities do. So the DNR would support hunting if the city allowed it, but the city has an ordinance against it. So that's an example. So we did meet with several cities, and we continue to talk with them. We've talked with representatives from Novi. We continue to talk to them, Southfield, Livonia, West Spoonfield, and others. So what we did in 2018, Southfield said, okay, we want to do what you're doing. So they want to do aerial deer counts. They wanted to log their calls from residents. They wanted to do a community deer survey. So they did the same exact thing that we modeled after Ann Arbor. So now we thought that's a good way to go. Let's get all the cities sort of doing the same kind of data collection so we can continue to work together in that way. So we've done aerial deer counts with them. So here's Southfield's aerial deer count in 2021. They beat us with 869. But if you look at the yellow border, that is the city border between Farmington Hills and Southfield. It's around the Inkster line. The deer do not know boundaries, so they're going to cross back and forth on that road. And we do see that actually in action when we're in the helicopter. You can see some. We've actually seen deer crossing, so it happens. You can see the concentrated areas is really that 10-mile, 11-mile area, and then you also have the area in their northwest section, which we didn't see a lot of deer in our count on the Farmington Hills side, but again, those deer cross back and forth. But other years, we've seen more deer on our side in that area. So if you combine them, Farmington Hills and Southfield this year, that's 1,598 deer that we saw. We didn't see all the deer. Year after year, we don't see all the deer. There's that percentage of what you didn't count. We don't factor that in there and take a guess. These are truly what we counted from the helicopter. We didn't add in deer. So now you put the two communities together. You can see the wooded areas. highlighted in green, and then the blue area is more of that river corridor down in the southern area where the Inkster area between 10 and 11 mile. So you can see sort of how the deer might travel through those wooded areas and what tends to happen. You can also see in the Heritage Park area, which is north of that blue area, which is Farmington. You can see the Heritage Park and woodland area has a high population of deer. You can also see when you're in those areas, sort of going back to some of the deer, the concerns by residents, that the deer are coming to their neighborhoods and eating their hostices and the plants that they plant. If you were to go into our park today, you would see a lot of the native species don't exist as much, or they're not as prevalent as they used to be. There's a browse line where the deer have eaten a lot of the vegetation because they've eaten all they can eat. So then they travel to the neighborhoods and they find food to eat. So they still bed in those areas. They also bed in the neighborhoods, but that's another example. So how many deer per square mile? So back to your question, Councilmember Bridges. This breaks it down. So you can see some of the larger areas. There's as many as 80 as of the 2021 survey in the Heritage Park area, whereas south of 11 mile, north of 10, and west of Farmington. It's a high population. Again, they don't just stay in that area, they travel and they go neighborhood to neighborhood. So you can, if you know the OCC area, and some of the homes have a lot of woods around that area, there's a lot of deer that travel across Farmington Road into that direction. And then you look at more of the east side towards Inkster and north of 9 miles, south of 10, there's 77 deer. And then you add that up to the 77 on the other square mile, which is in Southfield, and that's quite a few deer in that 2 square miles.
Thank you.
So I will go over this, and then we can ask questions again, and then we're going to go to a next action plan and talk about that. So you can see throughout this presentation, you can see the deer population is growing. Highest population is found in the wooded areas and river corridors, and we know that it's not just a local concern, it's a regional concern. Talking to our fellow neighbors on all directions, they're also having the same concern. So if we resolve this issue with management practice, it may not resolve it because the deer are going to continue to cross over those borders. So we do need to work with our neighboring communities to be able to do that. We will continue to collect the data that we've collected. We'll continue to do aerial deer counts. We'll continue to take calls from residents, meet with residents, collect the emails, and again, what's the next steps in terms of plan of action. Before we get to that, I want to just share a few more stories because we do have residents here, and I know for study session, residents typically don't come up to the mic, but in a city council meeting, they would be invited to do so. So some of the calls that I received, I just want to share some of those because I get several of the same type of calls that I'm going to refer to here. So a lot of residents are just trying to keep their yards looking nice, but they cannot find anything the deer won't eat. I've spoke to a lot of people, and you can probably tell me, and people in the audience can also say that you can tell them, hey, plant this, that'll work. Doesn't work. Over a couple years, that plant starts, it doesn't work. The deer will eat it. And I've gotten photos of deer getting sick over plants that they don't eat, but they just want to eat because they're hungry. So I've got photos, images of a lot of different things that people have sent me, but that was a unique one that the deer just won't stop eating. Whatever's there, they're going to eat it. So thousands of dollars in deer damage. One sort of sad story, people saved up for years, and several years of being married, they decided to invest in going on a trip together. They decided to put a lot of money in their landscape, and within a year, it was all destroyed by the deer. So it was sort of sickening to them that they, all their lives of being married, they thought, hey, we're going to do this together, and it was destroyed in a year. So they were heartbroken by it. A lot of people have given up on landscaping and gardening, and I think people can attest to that in the audience, and neighborhood associations. They can't plan anymore, and people have even said, we're thinking about moving. We're just tired of it. and nothing's being done. So what are you going to do? And that's been a big thing too. And we can't do anything about it. You can't just call in the exterminator. You can't call the DNR. And so it is a bigger discussion, which we're starting today. So I appreciate that. And the residents do as well. 15 to 20 deer in a yard is not uncommon. I've got many calls of people counting that many deer at one time in their yard. Again, they're saying deer is a nuisance. They used to love seeing the deer, and my own father lives in Farmington Hills, loves seeing the deer. Just recently, he's saying there's a lot of deer. And I would never thought I would have heard him say that, but just like a lot of residents I talked to, they've loved seeing the deer, but it's gotten to a point where we just got to sort of have less deer is what they're saying. They're starting to find ticks. Another story, a lot of deer droppings. So one particular person said, my grandkids come over, but I'm afraid they can't really play in the yard because there's so many deer droppings. I don't know if it's safe. So they actually stopped letting their grandkids go in their backyard, which is sort of sad of that concern. A lot of injured deer calls. Again, I mentioned that. And several people reported that they were actually in deer vehicle accidents. And a lot of calls about asking, can you hunt? The answer is you can't hunt. It was allowed in the past, but obviously we know that with our population, firearms wouldn't be a solution more than likely to use in our community. So the action plan. I'm going to invite Joe Valentine. Before I do want to say this city management, our city manager and our assistant city manager has been very supportive the last couple months on this, and I appreciate council taking this item up. We knew it was going to be a large item to address, and it was going to be a long-term item to be able to accomplish. But it's been great working with Joe Valentine as him and I sort of put this together. So I'm going to invite him to come up and talk about the action plan that we're proposing.
Thank you, Brian, for the background, and good evening, Mayor Barnett and members of council. The question, I think the fundamental question from right now is where do we go from here? And that's kind of the next step in this presentation that we want to talk to you about. Fundamentally, this is a regional issue, and we've heard that from the onset. And as the studies have occurred with the surveys and the work with the aerial studies and all the work that Brian and his team have done to get us to this point, have really identified this as a regional issue. It's not just a Farmington Hills issue. I'm sure you've heard about issues in other communities that have also struggled with this challenge here in Oakland County and really haven't successfully resolved those issues. So with that as a backdrop, we look at why this is somewhat unique to our area, and there's a couple of factors that we have to consider when we do that. First of all, the concentration of homes and the density of homes that we have in our communities are different from other areas of the state that have similar sized deer populations. So we have more interaction. The miles of roads, streets, and freeways that we have in our area is high compared to the deer population that we have in our area, which is different than you see in other areas of the state with similar sized deer populations. Additionally, we have shared travel corridors that provide limited coverage for the deer in our areas, so they do have to traverse other areas. We don't have the acreage that you see in like northern Michigan, for example. So they're on the move, and they do traverse between our communities. And lastly, as noted, the deer population itself is higher in this area than what typically, and I know the DNR doesn't want to acknowledge this, but they were giving us numbers of what typically you'd want to see for a healthy deer population in an acreage, and we are 4 times exceeding that. So there is an issue here that needs to be addressed, and it can't be addressed locally. So we're envisioning this regional approach. So in order to do that, we are proposing that we build a coalition of communities within Oakland County. And obviously, when you mention Oakland County, you would not think that if you mentioned where you were from and they said, tell me something about Oakland County, they wouldn't say, well, you have the highest car deer crash stats in the state of Michigan. It's not something that you would think of, but that's the truth. So there's a uniqueness to this issue that we have to address. And the way to do that is a collaborative approach with our neighboring communities and the county. And by developing this coalition, we want to work with the Natural Resource Commission to identify a regional deer management plan for Oakland County. Now, I mention that because the state Michigan Deer Management Plan for the Michigan Deer Management Plan for the state does provide in the plan that the plan does need to be routinely adjusted and updated as local conditions and other factors change. With our deer populations being as high as they are in this county, that is a local condition that needs a regional approach and needs a regional deer management plan to address it. So we are proposing by resolution the creation of a committee working with the county and the Michigan DNR to work eventually with the Natural Resources Commission of the state to develop that regional deer management plan for our county, to not only provide solutions that are applicable to our communities given the uniqueness that we have, but also identify funding sources that can be implemented to help solve these issues that we're facing with these high populations. So in your packet, there is a draft resolution that staff has prepared that we're asking for your consideration on at a later date. But we do want to get some feedback on that resolution to see if you feel that this is adequate in moving forward in addressing the concerns with the urban deer population. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Ken?
Yeah, have we started the discussions with the surrounding communities, the county and DNR,
We have with a
around the regional approach?
We have with a few of those communities. I don't know if Mr. Mexian wants to address this further.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I had sent out an email to roughly a dozen other communities and folks at the county level, informing them of how we were moving forward and that our council was going to be considering a draft resolution to help solidify and address this issue. And so I've gotten some positive feedback from some of our neighbors, some not so much, but they are aware of our effort and they thanked us for bringing that forward. Yep.
Thanks.
Val?
Well, I certainly support a cooperative effort, working with neighboring cities, those that, want to support the resolution. That's all well and good. But, so my concern is that people will sign on to the resolution, the other cities. It will go to the DNR, or Eagle now, is actually DNR is part of Eagle. So it will go there, go to our state rep, state senator, Oakland County executive, and so forth. And they're basically going to come back and say, well, if you think you have a problem, just like Ann Arbor, you can do something about it. There are probably a couple different options out there to deal with it, but they're going to say, we're not funding it. It's a local government responsibility to fund it. And so I certainly think we should try. I'm not opposed to it. But it may not be the final step. And so I think we still need to move forward with having public meetings where we bring in knowledgeable speakers. I call them Deer Education 101 and 102, where first we educate people about just the life cycle of deer. For example, how far do they travel? They may travel from Middle Belt across Inkster, but are they traveling from west of Hagerty all the way into Southfield? Again, I can't answer that question, but a wildlife expert could tell us how much they're traveling, because we may hear the response, well, we shouldn't do anything if no other community is doing it, because they're just going to keep traveling back and forth and it won't fix the problem. But I don't know that. If they say, well, the deer are only going to travel a couple miles, that's not that far. That's, from Middle Belt past Inkster or so forth. So I think we need to get a lot of questions answered first, and we also have to learn about different wildlife management techniques. I'll bring up the word. I know people don't want to hear the word, but I, for one, want to learn more about a call. I'm not saying that that's what we have to do, but I'm saying we need to at least learn about it. Or what other options are there? Again, a resolution is great, but we have to also take it to the next step, and we can't wait a year saying to our residents, well, we passed a resolution, and the resolution went to the state, and the DNR hasn't responded, or Oakland County Executive hasn't responded, or whoever may be. We need to continue to move forward, educate the public, educate the council on the deer's habits, and what are options for dealing with it. Because I agree, I believe they're beautiful animals. And, I can remember years ago, you'd see one in your yard now and then, or a few, and it was a great treat. But now the stories of seeing 14 in a yard, it's not uncommon. The deers are having triplets. It's not uncommon. And from what I understand is that means they're a very healthy population because there's lots of food for them to eat when they're having triplets, which means they continue to increase in numbers. And at some point, as mentioned, it's not good for the undergrowth. It's not just about vegetable gardens and the story about a lady who can't grow vegetables, so she moved her tomato plants onto her deck, and the deer are so brazen they come onto her deck and eat her tomatoes now, on her deck. So it's not just about that, but the trillium. We used to have tons of trillium in this community. I used to have a lot at my house. Hardly see it at all anymore. They're eating the arborvitaes. You can see where the deer are because you can see the line. Yeah, they eat the plants you don't want them to eat. But the point is they are destroying the natural wildlife. It's not just flowers and vegetables. And so it is a concern. If you're going to have deer, though, you don't want an unhealthy population because eventually they will die of disease and spread disease. And I certainly don't think we want to have chronic wasting disease either. That's kind of a horrible death for deer. So my point is we need to continue with the next step as well and not wait another year and continue to just say, well, we're still waiting on the state.
Absolutely, and I think Mr. Farmer has some additional points on that, and I appreciate you raising that question. I think the fundamental challenge we have is there's one playbook for the state with limited plays. What we're suggesting is that we develop a new playbook for Oakland County that gives us some additional plays to better manage this herd that we're challenged with, because if we continue to work off of the state's deer management plan, we're very limited in what we can do, and the options are very limited. We think that the uniqueness of the environment that we have here and the size of the deer population warrants new plays in that playbook that we can use to better address the concerns of the community. But to your point, you can't wait forever to get that done, and I know Mr. Farmer has some comments he'd like to share on that as well.
So the ecosystem, which I didn't even address that, but there's definitely impacts on the whole ecosystem when it comes to the browse line in our parks and in our natural areas. So we won't even get into that, but that's a great point of educating people on the impacts and the deer and how they travel. But when it comes to, I think the underlying issue which you brought up is, what do you do? And do you manage the population or you just leave it be? And what it comes down to, and then what we're suggesting is really what's the process to making that decision. We've got a lot of, there's a lot of great benefit if you did do a deer call. We've got local cares in our community that is actually, they serve venison to people in need, and they get, through Sportsmen's for Hunger program, they get a lot, pounds and pounds of venison, and every year they run out of it. So it's a great natural resource for feeding people. So there's things in place, but again, it comes down to a plan, and then do we manage them or not? So we suggest if we manage them in Farmington Hills, it's not going to matter so much if Southfield doesn't do it and other communities. So it might be a little bit more difficult, and that's why I wanted to go a direction.
Ken, you had another question?
I did. And actually, could we go back a slide to the one with the D, that one?
Oh, this one?
That one right there. And the reason I asked my previous question is that the South Oakland Mayor's Dinners, a couple of years ago, about the time we started our survey, we had a meeting and the topic was deer, and I will say that the entire group was in concert that there are issues, but as Val mentioned, you know, sometimes it's hard to get all those people coordinated. And one of the other, and Brian, I appreciate you bringing up the results from the survey, but one of the things that was, I didn't think was, it was kind of not in this data, was that a vast majority of people, while saying that something should be done with the deer, they didn't want them to be killed because they were in opposition to that. And when I read through this action plan, management plan, one of the things that caught my eye here was management methods routinely adjusted and updated as local conditions, technology, regulations, and other aspects. But it's the word technology. Because there are technologies, but I remember in these other previous conversations, the state only limits you to essentially one technology. But there are newer technologies out there. Is this saying that there's a change in that, and we can look at those other technologies?
Currently, the DNR only has tested other things. For example, I think you might refer to sterilization and other techniques. They currently do not allow, but they have allowed Ann Arbor to test that with a outside firm. But regularly, it's not. It's only on. I don't know if it's the director that allowed that temporarily to test, but it's not in their. They're not allowed to continue to do those practices across the state.
So this management plan enacted by the Eagle or whatever they are today actually is a little misleading, because if there are newer technologies out there, and there are a couple that have been shown to be really effective, one of which is actually injecting them with it's a porcine derivative that inhibits, and you have to get into the biology of the reproduction capacity of the deer, but basically it makes the egg impermeable to any spermatozoa, so you eliminate the ability for that deer to reproduce, but you haven't killed them, and it lasts for a couple of years when they do that. So those types of technologies, which wouldn't sacrifice the deer, what I'm hearing is that they don't even consider that you can do those types of things.
At this time, it's not a regular practice.
Okay. See, I think that would be a little bit more palatable to a lot of folks, but
Especially if you tag them at the same time, and then you can get a better idea of the number of deer and who you've injected and who you haven't.
yeah, and that's actually important, because it does require a couple of years down the road, you have to redo that, but it doesn't change their normal spontaneous reproductive cycling. It just inhibits the ability to conceive. And if we start talking about different things, and if our only option is a call to get rid of, to reduce that number and actually to start to get rid of some of these nuisance issues and starting to deal with it, that's a hard thing. And a lot of people, I know that I like Val, well, yeah, I do like you, but I was referring to, I like your story. Similar to Val, like to look at them, but when I arrived at home from our last meeting, I literally walked into the house, walked past the front window, and there was a deer standing right at the front window, having just emptied the bird feeder that my wife puts out there, and was staring at me like, okay, hey, it's empty, what are you gonna do here? And I went out front, and he just stood there, or she actually just stood there and was like, dude. Yeah, I couldn't hardly get it to leave. But
It happened to me as I was responding to Roger's email about how many deer we have.
yeah,
And all of a sudden, there's this
it's an
group of
interesting
deer in my
question.
front yard. making my dog very unhappy.
Oh, my God.
So I would invite you to, there's some research in Ann Arbor that has been done in sterilization and the technique they use, pretty graphic, I won't describe it, but
It was not good.
disturbing. So, and again, that created a lot of issues in Ann Arbor. So I think we've learned a lot of what not to do as well, as an example.
They used essentially a surgical procedure to do that.
Yeah.
And that's definitely,
recovery.
with no recovery, no other thing, that's a difficulty. I'm talking about some new technologies that have been evolving, and that's why that word caught my eye, is that if there are new technologies, we also need to look at those, but if they won't let us use them, then that becomes an issue.
I think that's part of the conversation is that we want to have with them. And again, Ann Arbor, they made a great effort trying different things, and they've gotten some authority to do some things. So again, it's great that they've done that because we've learned a lot from that. They stuck their neck out there, but again, they made an effort, which is great. So the DNR has been very supportive in this. It's just we need a conversation and a plan that works together with other communities to be able to, we feel, to accomplish a larger regional goal of managing the deer.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of try to get this moving a little quicker because we have to end in a few minutes to go to our normal meeting. I know Mike has a question. I don't know if anybody else does, and I know Joe Derrick's here, and I would like to hear from him for a few minutes. But to just quickly recap, looks like we're talking about first passing a resolution to at least get some of our neighbors to sign on that this is a problem. And then we need to create a quick timeline, and I'd like to have that along with the resolution. I don't know how you all feel for the next council meeting in August, so that we can at least get the ball rolling and have another discussion about where we want to go beyond that, because I think this might be a SEMCOG issue, because we are dealing with fugitive assets that move all over. And I don't want to give our residents false hope that we're going to do something this year, but we're going to see how fast we can move to get at least some of these issues addressed so that we don't keep doing this for the next 10 years. Mike, you had a question, and then I want to hear from Joe. Did you want to say something, Joe? Or am I just putting words in your mouth? No, I figured. Okay, let Mike ask his question first, and then quick, pop up over there.
I have just not really a question, a comment, and as a request to the city manager, and if you could seek the DNR involvement, come to council, if you could, give us a study session on this issue. Councilmember Noel mentioned about educating council members and the public. That's part of my education. I would be, if we can get the DNR to come in, give us their analysis regarding measures that we can do as a city, and also put into perspective the issue regarding deer population growth in our community, and for us to have I can make a more informed opinion about and judgment about things. But I feel that we're getting a lot of good information. Some of it's anecdotal, and but I like to see the DNR, which is the state environmental expert, whoever they come in, give us some expert opinion regarding this issue. And the numbers regarding 1855 crashes, I like to see the data in regards to how much of that percentage of that is in northern Oakland County. I haven't seen data on that. So if you could, my question is to get DNR to come in and help council to understand the issue more important at a study session.
And you'd like those crash numbers by community?
Correct. And I do support the resolution that we're offering tonight. I do.
No, it's not on the agenda tonight.
Okay, but I do support the idea of that action plan to be taking place. Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, our retired naturalist, Joe.
About to get educated right here.
I know.
Madam Mayor, members of council, Council Member Noel, I really appreciate your questions that you had as to what you wanted to do as far as education goes. I've been studying deer on our 2 acres for almost 15 years now. I do an awful lot of nature photography. I walk around with deer. Some people laugh at this, but I talk to deer only because it may slow them down so I can get really nice photos. You can't talk to rabbits, you can't talk to various other things, you can't talk to birds, but you can talk to deer. Our urban population is much different than those that are hunted. I used to teach hunting classes many years ago, and I've known most of the outdoorers in the state of Michigan. Our urban deer are extremely intelligent, but they're extremely nervous and they're very high-strung. So a lot of the accidents, a lot of the crashes, a lot of the things you might see on YouTube where they go through windows and everything occurs just because they're that high-strung and they panic very easily. Now, those that are very calm have learned to cross streets here. I've walked behind them when they've crossed 10 Mile. They either listen for traffic, watch for traffic, or do both. But then I've also seen coyotes do that and some other wildlife. We actually we had a group of deer that would meet at the diving shop at 10 Mile in Middle Belt, and when traffic was really high, they would walk through the tube under the road to get to the other side. And I don't think deer in a native habitat like enclosures that way, but they would do that there. The owner of the dive shop would see them do that on a fairly regular basis. In regards to the age of deer, they live to be 12 or 14 if they're lucky. They do disperse. They are territorial. In many times of the year, especially now with the doe and fawns, they may kind of team up with a few together, but many times they're kicking another female and her babies out of an area. The same thing goes with bucks. The typical deer, untouched by people, will live in a square mile its entire life if it's a female. During the breeding season, the males may travel up to 5 miles looking for a date. I'll go through this very quickly for you. We have tons of European buckthorn everywhere in southern Michigan. From what I've observed over the years, that's most of their food in the summer months. My 240 feet of driveway is trimmed regularly. They eat buckthorn, so there is an available food source for them to feed on. In our park areas where we have mature stands of trees at the back of Heritage, of course Woodland Hills is mostly mature trees, there never was much food. They do eat the wildflowers, but there never was a big food base for them. So a deer is basically an edge animal. It likes a wooded area and it likes an open area. So our suburbs are a perfect place for that. As the map showed, all the little dots of the concentrations of deer are where most of us have big lots. We have really large lots, and that's where most of the concentrations of deer are. I've noticed with the deer that I met about 15 years ago, when I saw the first deer tracks and a fawn track by our creek, I ran over to Judy to tell her, hot dog, we've got deer. And a few weeks later, all of my daylilies that I liked disappeared. And over the years, I was telling people when I was working for the Nature Center as to how to live with wildlife. I'll give you the pros and cons of what to do when you have a problem.
To be quick, though.
But yeah, I let you live with it. But anyway, Judy just said, okay, smart butt, what are you going to tell yourself now? So what I have done is I've fenced areas. I know in many fences aren't allowed. This is just one thing that I've done. I fenced a garden area. If deer can't see through an area, especially like a wooden fence, they won't jump it unless they're stressed. They can jump over 4 foot of fencing of any variety. About a half of the time when I followed them to get pictures of their hoofs off the ground all at the same time, their back hooves are hitting it. I added 2 more feet of fencing within our property, and for the last 4 years, they've never tried that. Deer can't jump 6 feet of fence from a standing stop. Panicked and fleeing for their lives, yes. They can also jump a 2-lane road. That's an idea, whether to fence or not to fence. Oh, by the way, the white-tailed deers are state animal, if you'd like to know. I've talked to other states over the years with live trapping of deer. They readily do not go into traps. When they have caught some, being they're such a high-strung animal, many of them die during the process. So you can't really move them, and where do you move them to? I've tried some deer sprays. There's one in a red container from Menards, can't remember the name. It works really well when I spray flowers. I don't want them to eat. Also Liquid Fence, English Garden sells it. It smells so bad that works for a few days and works fairly well. In southern Michigan, always, even before deer were in Farmington Hills, twins were kind of the norm and occasionally triplets. There is plenty of food for them here. I've even followed them around to see what they eat and don't eat. Everybody gets upset about having coyotes around. I mean, the news media is always covering a story on it. They do take fawns, It's very tough for them to take adult deer, but I know of 2 coyotes that took a doe down. Took them 30 minutes. You can't always get your happy meal right away, but they did take it down and they ate it. So having a predator like that around is something to, something to maybe just leave alone. I've been around large bucks in the fall. I don't want to be on news at 11 and not being able to watch it. I've never felt threatened by any of them, but I'm very careful with what I do, and I choose when I take photos and other things. A deer will, again, I've seen the issue with pets, will defend itself or defend its babies. And a male buck during breeding season, if he's got a girlfriend or 2 hanging around, he very well may defend her. So again, education is a big part of this. I've noticed a lot of people fencing gardens and fencing them a little higher, which has worked. I've experienced the trees that have been rubbed on by the bucks, the special trees that I seem to plant with the thousands of other ones that I could care less about, or the ones they choose to destroy. But I've learned to live with that, but then I've got enough property. Dear Betty.
I hate to do this to you, but we have like 3 minutes between meetings now.
Okay.
And will you come back when we have our educational meeting?
Sure.
And maybe do a quick PowerPoint or something too?
Yeah, I can explain to you what I've done that works for me.
Okay.
As you know, many people, I mean, I like deer, I've seen what they do. They're extremely intelligent. They do steps. They've walked up our deck steps to eat some plants by our bedroom. When I want to know how they got into that area, I walk out gently. I talk in the same tone of voice. I never move my hands very quickly, and eventually they show me how they got over to that spot. They walked through the railing, twisted over to the side, went down the steps, and then they just continue to eat. They look in many windows. They climb on decks. They know how to tip bird feeders. When I worked at the park, the deer feeding issue is a problem. Feed stores have told me that for many years people were buying more deer food, such as carrots and sugar beets and things, and they were buying bird seed. And the DNR really started this problem by allowing baiting in the state many years ago for hunting, because it made additional resource as far as money goes for farmers, feed stores, grocery stores up north, because everybody was selling sugar beets and carrots and stuff. And then it worked into recreational feeding of deer, 2 gallons a day. They allowed that. So people all over in our communities were going to stores buying feed and feeding deer, because at the back of Heritage, we had Tupperware containers with cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, corn. We never knew who was doing it, but people were bringing in tons of food so they could see the deer. So as far as a cull goes, which is a kill, I really don't know how you'd handle that. In large areas with huge tracts of land,
Okay, Joe,
maybe
I
you
love
can
you.
do it.
I'm just going to have
I don't have an off switch, so I don't take no offense.
I know, I've talked to you on the phone before.
I know. No, I'd be happy to come and
I
answer
love
any
ya.
of your questions, and if you folks would like to see what we've done at our house,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to show you.
That'd be great.
Great, thank you so much, because I know the public would like to know some kind of remediation that they could take at this time. And Judy, he's all yours. We love him, though. That's going to conclude our study session for tonight. Stay tuned. We will be doing more. Obviously, we need a lot of education, and Joe has been a good resource for us in the past. We'll continue in the future. And we're going to just take a 5-minute break. We're going to start the regular meeting 5 minutes late. This has been a great topic, and I appreciate all of your support and attendance. And for those of you watching at home, it's a little romantic in here because we had what did we have, a surge and the circuit's down?
Yeah, it's the lighting only in here. It just the
We
circuit
have no
failed.
lighting.
I'll make a jump
We're
on
putting
over here.
it on the DTE tab. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break and then we will be back for our regular meeting at 7:35.
Thanks.
Great, that's cool.
Especially when you start at 5:15. That's right.
This is officially calling the City of Farmington Hills regular council meeting for July 26, 2021 at 7:30 PM together. Sorry for the little delay. We had a long set of study sessions, including a report on the deer population and possible solutions, and we will be following up with that, and hopefully you'll stay tuned so you'll know when we're having additional study sessions and what other things that we can do to help mitigate the problems with our growing deer population. We will start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is the roll call.
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Boulware,
Here.
Council Members Bridges,
Yeah, here.
Knoll. Here. Massey,
Present.
Newland,
Here.
Strickfaden,
Here.
all present.
Next is approval of the regular session meeting agenda. Are there any deletions or additions? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the agenda. Dr. Massey?
Madam Mayor, I would move approval of the agenda as published.
Support. It's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Boulware. This is a roll call vote.
Just a regular vote, Mayor.
Regular
Yes.
vote. Still doing everything by roll call, just like we have to do online. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None. This passes unanimously. Next is correspondence. Does anybody have any correspondence to report other than what we've already received? I will point out that I have been in, finally got a call back from my friend who is Dan Scripps, chair of the the Michigan Public Service Commission. We have discussed ad nauseum, I might add, the problems that we're having with the continual outages of power throughout our community. While we recognize that there have been storms, the complaint lines to the PSC have been filled with complaints from our citizens and business owners, as they should be. I want to thank everybody who has been following up on that. I appreciate it. We will also be following up on our filing a complaint with the PSC on the failure of DTE to adequately provide a stable grid in the Farmington Hills region, and to see what the Public Service Commission can do to make sure that DTE's feet are held to the fire. It has to be a fire because there's no electricity for their feet to be held to. And to those of you citizens who have been suffering so long with powers on, off, mostly off in the last 2 weeks, we truly apologize. We've been trying to work with DTE to get the problems resolved, and to be honest, they have not been easy to work with. I know they've been under pressure, but when you're without power and you have to clean out your refrigerator and your freezer several times in a row in the last 3 weeks, if you've lost insulin and other medicine that you require, if you have oxygen and your oxygen tanks can't be powered because you don't have electricity, it's a very dire situation. So for those of you who are healthy, I'm very happy for you, but for those of you who have been suffering, we are really going to take care of this problem and stay posted. We've also been in conversation with our state representative, Samantha Steckloff, and our state senator, Jeremy Moss, as well. So stay tuned, and I know we've gotten a lot of complaints through our email system on the power problem as well. Next is the consent agenda, which will be approved by one motion unless somebody wishes to take it off the agenda, off the consent agenda and move it to a regular item. The consent agenda, we will have no separate discussions of all items, and it will be now read by the Mayor Pro Tem, Jackie Boulware.
The consent agenda items 7 through 13. Number 7 is recommended approval of the Evergreen Farmington Sanitary Drainage District, Chapter 20, Section 471 Agreement, and that's CMR 7-21-73. Item number 8, recommended approval of a cost participation agreement with the Road Commission for Oakland County for the resurfacing of 12 Mile Road, Farmington Road to Orchard Lake Road. And that's CMR 7-21-74. Item number 9, recommended approval of award of bid for the Heritage Park Bridge replacement to LJ Construction Incorporated in the amount of $339,017, and that's CMR 7-21-75. Item number 10, recommended approval of purchase of body armor and related equipment with Alley Brothers uniforms representing GH Armor Systems in the amount not to exceed $73,000 with possible extensions, and that's CMR 7-21-76. Item number 11, recommended approval of authorization of payment for carpeting and floor work on the 3rd floor of the Hawk to Beckwith Floors in the amount of $13,965. That's CMR 7-21-77. Item number 12, recommend approval of the City Council study session meeting minutes of July 12, 2021. And final one, number 13, recommended approval of the City Council regular session meeting minutes of July 12, 2021.
Okay, is there a motion?
Ma-
Councilmember Knoll?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read by the Mayor Pro Tem.
Support.
Second. Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Knoll, seconded by Councilmember Newland. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland,
Yes.
Bridges,
Yes.
Olaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes. And my computer is down with the meeting.
Public hearing. Okay.
Next item is a public hearing. Boy, I thought my glasses were bad. I think it's this thing. Public hearing and consideration of adoption of resolution approving the brownfield.
No comments, council members' comments and.
Oh, thank you. I was just following you to public hearing. Okay. We're doing okay here. We'll get it through. Next is public hearing, public questions and comments. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes, including telling me I'm on the wrong part of the agenda. And you're more than welcome to address us at the podium with any question or concern you may have, and we look forward to hearing from you. You don't have to fill out a blue form in order to take advantage of this.
Well, Mayor Barnett, that was really my fault. I was trying to rush this thing along.
Jackie, I will follow you anywhere, and apparently I did. Just come on up. Thanks. No, it's, the internet went down, and I tried to reload it, and it won't reload.
Hi, Suzanne Zimmerly, Kilray Court in Farmington Hills. I just wanted to follow up on Joe's presentation. The spray that he was referring to is called Deer Stop. It does come in a red bottle. It's made by a company called Messinas, Messinas. I have between 40 and 50 hosta plants in my yard, which are kind of filet mignon to deer, and they're all fine. I spray with this stuff. Theoretically, you do once a month. I do about every 2 weeks, and again after it rains, and it works. Also like to mention, I thought the deer were eating some flowers that I have in pots on my deck, and I discovered it's actually groundhog. So some of that low-growing chewing that you're seeing maybe on the bottom of things may very well be groundhog, which I'm just thrilled to find out he's living under my deck now. So that's another problem. But I just wanted to say this Messinas spray does really work. They'll take a look at my hostas and they go eat the buckthorn. So I'd really suggest it if you're having a problem with plants to get some of the spray. I've gotten it at Farmer John's and also at English Gardens. You can also order it online at messinas.com. And it works, so. And it smells good. You don't have to stay out of your yard because it's made of, I think, lavender and eucalyptus or something, so it's not like some of the sprays that are rotten eggs and all that kind of stuff, so I want to give it a try.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything they want to say during public question and comment? Okay, and that brings us, do we have a published agenda that someone can run and grab me?
No, they didn't send one out this week.
Okay, next item is council member comments and announcements. Do any council members have comments or announcements? Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like two things. One is that Farmington Safe and the GES Memorial Fund are going to be having our annual softball tournament this year. It's going to be happening on August the 7th. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning at Founders Park, and teams can sign up, and they can actually, a team is really easy to put together. It only has to be enough people to man the softball field, and it's a double elimination tournament. And it's all about raising awareness on mental health and suicide prevention. And the other is a real quick personal moment. I just want to wish my wife a very happy birthday today.
Aww. We all support that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to comment about zoning around the city. I'd like the city manager, if he could, take a look at our commercial parking lots around Farmington Hills to ensure that there's no blight, nuisance area regarding potholes and parking lots. Secondly, landscaping is what it should be meeting the city ordinance as well. And I had a discussion with our police chief in regards to speeding in neighborhoods, and I would like for the city to look at possibly getting more signage, some speed signs, 25 miles per hour speed limit signs in neighborhoods. I don't know what that may be, what our process toward doing that, but I'd like to see some effort geared toward that, because I do see that a lot of our neighborhoods, as we all know, don't have sidewalks, and people walk in the street, go to school, as well as walking, taking their walks. But I see a lot of speeding occurring in neighborhoods, and this would be a great opportunity for us to, slow down these speeders in these neighborhoods. So if you could investigate the possibility of adding additional speed limit signs in neighborhoods, that would be something I'd like for us to take a study session if you need to do that, Mayor. Okay. Or take a look at that, investigating posting more speed limit signs in neighborhoods. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, anybody else? Seeing no one, it's now time for the city manager update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And good evening, council. So as most people know, there are still many areas of the city that again experienced power outages over this past weekend due to the storms that came through. We continue to be in contact with our DTE representatives who are obviously monitoring the situation. Their app tells us that most of the areas in the city will be back with power by 11:30 this evening. That may have changed since the last time I checked, but we appreciate everybody's patience. It's been a very interesting few weeks. Along those same lines, our Department of Public Services continues to move through the city, picking up debris from the storm that occurred on July 7th. There are still approximately 5 sections of the city that still have not been touched from our crews yet, so they're still need to be picked up. Residents can call our Division of Public Works at 248-871-2850 if they have any questions. Our 11-mile road project continues. Beginning today, actually, traffic will be shifted to the south side of 11-mile road to accommodate construction on the north side. And as such, local access and traffic will be maintained in the eastbound direction only from Middle Belt Road to Inkster. Lastly, I did receive an email from a resident regarding our police non-emergency number repeatedly being out of service. For those folks that are subscribers to our FH Alert system that you can get to through our website to register for, you will get these alerts as well. Had a conversation with Kelly Monaco, our Director of Central Services. This has been an ongoing issue. We've been working on it for some time and trying to tie down a pretty pesky communication error. And we're working very diligently, very closely with AT&T and our technology consultants, our E911 folks, to try to isolate the problem. But it is proving to be challenging. So we appreciate folks' patience on that. And it only affects the non-emergency 911, not the non-emergency police number. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? Next is the public hearing. Item number 2 on the agenda, public hearing and consideration of adoption of a resolution approving the brownfield plan for Rose Senior Living located at 29000 West 11 Mile Road, CMR 7-21-72.
Hello. Good
Hello,
evening. It's
Ms.
nice to not
Seymour.
have
How
to
are
remember to
you?
unmute myself. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It's great to see you all. Before you this evening through public hearing and resolution of approval is consideration of a brownfield plan for 2900 West 11 Mile Road for Edward Rose and Sons. This is going to be redevelopment of a 305,000 square foot facility, which will include 117 independent living and 90 assisted living. This plan was approved through the chair by the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority on July 8th, 2021. This represents a private investment of approximately $40 million into the community and will generate approximately 60 new full-time jobs. They are seeking reimbursement of $2.6 million in eligible activities, which includes a 15% construction contingency, which is pretty standard in the brownfield world, as well as costs associated with brownfield plan preparation and implementation. This also represents $2.1 million that will go into the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund to help spur redevelopment projects, as well as over $1 million in administrative fees to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Assumptions in the plan include full valuation by 2024 with a 1% inflation rate multiplier on the out years. It's important to note that this is a local-only brownfield plan and will not capture school taxes. At full valuation, the property will in fact generate over $350 million for the school annually. Developer is anticipated to be reimbursed within 7 years and represent a very significant increase to the taxable value of Farmington Hills at about $500,000 on an annual basis. Public hearing notice was sent to all taxing jurisdictions and posted in the local newspaper on July 15th, and I'm available, as well as Mark Prokowski with Edward Rose and Sons, to answer any specific questions you may have regarding this request.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none. Do we want, does anybody else want to speak before I open up the public hearing?
Madam Mayor, I just have one comment.
Sure.
Just a point of clarification. So if you're confused with Sam Seimer's representation this evening, she is representing the city on this particular issue, not the developer. I just wanted to clarify that. She is an employee of our newly procured AKT Peerless company that is our as-needed economic development consultant. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
So you are the city tonight.
She is the city for all practical purposes.
Yes. So confused. It's really hard to read an agenda on a little phone, too, by the way. Okay, so if there's no questions from council at this moment, then I will officially open up the public hearing. Anybody from the public that wishes to come forward, please do at this time. Seeing nobody rushing quickly to the podium, I will now officially close the public hearing and bring this back to council. Mr. Bridges.
Madam Mayor, I have a motion. Okay.
I think that's wonderful.
I move the council adopt a resolution approving the brownfield plan for Rose Senior Living located at 2900 West 11 Mile Road. I want to yield to our city attorney. Is that sufficient for the motion? Do you need additional comments made about this motion?
Let's see, there is a a recommended motion, and your motion refers to the resolution, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. If it refers to the resolution approving the brownfield plan, then that is sufficient.
Thank you. I move that we, as such, what I stated, please. Thank you.
Okay, so Councilmember Bridges has moved to support and pass the resolution that appeared in our agenda for, to formally allow for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority's plan for remediation. Is there a second?
Or
It's been seconded by Dr. Massey. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It passes. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing the building grow and develop and really appreciate it. Moving on, our next item of business is consideration of approval of the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Brownfield plan. No. I'll get it together, folks. I promise, I promise.
Got a small phone, so I understand.
Well, now I'm just trying to read in the dark. Consideration of approval of the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business and Licensing, Article 1, Licenses, to revise and update the provision throughout the article. This calls for City Attorney to fill us in real quickly. We've been studying this for a while.
Sure, yes. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and City Council members. This has been the subject of 3 study sessions by Council. This ordinance and the next 2 ordinances on your agenda have been discussed in detail at those study sessions, and we've worked through many issues addressing them. This is the first of those 3 ordinances. This relates to a proposed set of amendments to an existing article in the code book, and it is a general article. It addresses all licenses issued by the city to various types of businesses, and there are a number of them that the city requires licenses for. So this would apply to all of them. This particular ordinance is basically an updating of what you currently have in your code. It hasn't been looked at or updated in at least a couple decades, and maybe even longer, maybe even twice that long. It's hard to tell, but it has been quite some time, and some of the language is antiquated, outdated, refers to things that no longer exist, and so it adjusts those things, and it also clarifies some provisions to help us with the enforcement of the various ordinances and clear up some of the possible discrepancies that could exist or disagreements that could exist to help smooth the process should this ordinance need to be utilized. So it is before you tonight for an introduction and first reading. If it is approved tonight, it would come back for a second reading and adoption at a future meeting and become effective. And if approved at that time, it would become effective 21 days later. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions of the city attorney? Okay, seeing none. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Councilmember Knoll.
Sure, I would move that we introduce an ordinance to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinance, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, Article 1, Licenses, to revise and update provisions throughout the article.
Or
It's been moved by Councilmember Knoll, supported by Councilmember Massey. Any questions? Any comments? Seeing none, is this a roll call vote?
Council members Newland,
Yes.
Bridges,
Yes.
Bullaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of introduction of an ordinance to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, by adding Article 2, Smoking Lounges, to license and regulate smoking lounges in the city in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. Again, I turn this over to the city attorney.
Yes, thank you. This is the second ordinance, of course, and this relates to the regulation of smoking lounges and proposes to require them to become licensed in order to operate in the city of Farmington Hills. Just a little background here. Back around maybe 2010, cities started to notice, and many communities started to notice, an uptick in smoking lounges where individuals can go and use tobacco or other similar products, nicotine-containing products, through various methods, and they can gather at these lounges. And they started sprouting up at various locations in the city. And a few years ago, maybe two to 3 years ago, started to see some issues arise from a police standpoint at some of these establishments. Not necessarily all of them, but some of them. And they're open late at night. And some incidents were arising that were of some concern to public safety in the areas that are around them, and making sure that they are operated responsibly, managed responsibly, so that they don't become a problem in the community. And throughout the city's history, it has occasionally had different types of businesses that City Council has seen fit to license in order to address situations like that, so that the city could have regulations in place to make sure that they don't become a danger to the public. A lot of these are in strip malls or in other similar locations where members of the public might be around, and want to make sure that the city is safe and comfortable and quiet for the community, and everyone inside it, as well as people enabled to engage in the businesses that they choose to engage in. The city is not looking to shut any businesses down or stop it, but licensing is a way to make sure it works in the community properly. And council has studied this pretty thoroughly, as mentioned, and the idea here is to promote the proper and responsible management and operation of smoking establishments in this particular ordinance, and prevent potential adverse impacts, protect the health, safety, and welfare. Things of that nature are all the objectives stated in this at the beginning of this ordinance. And as I mentioned, this ordinance requires these businesses to become licensed, to come in and apply for a license with the city. There's a 90-day grace period for existing smoking lounges to come in and get their license. If this is adopted by City Council and becomes effective, they would be required to come in within 90 days of the adoption and apply for their license and go through that process. And the ordinance sets up that process for what needs to be in the application, what the process of review is, and how it gets approved. And it gets approved on an administrative basis through the clerk's office. It's not necessary to come back to council as this ordinance is written, and that enables perhaps a quicker approval process. It doesn't have to wait for an agenda to get on necessarily. It also provides for the hours of operation. It provides that they are to operate no later than 1 a.m. and they cannot open no earlier than 8 a.m. They have an age restriction, which is consistent with the smoking regulations in the state right now. 18 and over only are allowed in these establishments, and it has other standards of conduct that are set forth in the ordinance. It also has a provision regarding dancing and live entertainment, which enables the business owner to get a special permit to allow live entertainment, which is something that has been seen at these establishments. It has a license fee that would be paid to cover the city's administrative costs in administering this ordinance and issuing the licenses, and that would be established by way of a resolution that we hope to have ready for you for adoption. If this is introduced this evening, it will come back at a future meeting, and we would try to have that resolution establishing the fee for these licenses ready for you at that time to be adopted at the same time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Bridges.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jopik, for your comments. I appreciate that. This particular ordinance, we've been very careful not to be arbitrary. Is that correct regarding that? Because the fact is that it's bringing these particular businesses under the business license format, but we're not doing anything that's arbitrary to this particular business. That's correct, right? In regards to regulating, other than what is already known about, the fact that we're not doing anything arbitrary that's only set this business apart from other businesses, similar business. Is that correct?
That is correct, and in fact, that was a lot of the discussion with City Council during your study sessions, to come up with a set of fair and reasonable standards of conduct that would have to be undertaken, and a fair and reasonable review process for the licenses that's consistent. And so there's some standards in there for issuance of the license that are applicable to everybody equally. Each applicant gets reviewed the same way, and that diminishes the possibility of arbitrariness.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'm not motion.
Go ahead. Dr. Massey?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move the introduction of an ordinance to amend Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, by adding Article 2, Smoking Lounges, to license and regulate smoking lounges in the city in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Strickfaden. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Bridges,
Yes.
Bulaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, by adding Article 3, Miniature Golf Course, Go-Kart Tracks, and Arcades, to license and regulate miniature golf courses, go-kart tracks, and arcades in the city for the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. Again, Mr. Jopik, we turn to you.
Sure, thank you. And I can make this fairly quick. This ordinance is set up in a very similar fashion as the ordinance relating to smoking lounges. Of course, it addresses a different type of business, but many of the provisions are very similar. There are some differences. For example, the hours of operation. These businesses need to be closed by midnight and not 1 a.m. The smoking lounges council discussed and wanted it until 1 a.m., but these business establishments would be midnight. Another difference is there's no age restriction. Of course, these types of facilities often have younger individuals there and families there, and that is a major concern, to make sure that these places are, these business establishments are safe for the families to use. Also, obviously, no limitations on entertainment and whatnot, because there are often birthday parties and things of that nature that council discussed at these types of businesses, and not the typical type of live entertainment that you see at a smoking lounge or other similar types of more adult type facilities. Again, a fee for this license would be established in a resolution coming before you next time if this is moved forward. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion? Mr. Bridges.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the council move the approval of the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, by adding Article 3, Miniature Golf Courses, Go-Kart Tracks, and Arcades, to license and regulate miniature golf courses, go-kart tracks, and the arcades in the city in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Support.
Been moved by Mr. Bridges, seconded by Councilmember Strickfaden. Is there any questions, discussions? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Bulaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland,
Yes.
Bridges,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes. Next item is number
Madam
6.
Mayor?
Yes.
Could I just make one quick comment?
Absolutely.
And this is more for our public that are watching, because we've just done 3 introductions of ordinances, and the votes, obviously we've had unanimous votes on each one of these. And it should be noted that a lot of effort and discussion went into these, and they actually represent a really nice, and almost hate to say the word, that we all came together and we came to consensus after a lot of discussion and a lot of debate. And because that often happens during study sessions, and not everybody watches the study session when they watch the council, it was a real interesting process. I think the city attorney said we had at least 3 separate study sessions on these to hone in on the issues and get this crafted the way that we were all comfortable with. And I just think that they were not unanimous as we went through those discussions. And I commend all of my peers on council for doing, for working so diligently on behalf of the community to get them to a point where we could all have a vote that seems like, oh yeah, this is almost perfunctory. No, it was a lot of good work that went into it.
Yeah, a lot of work behind the scenes. This did start back in January with the beginning of our goal-setting sessions, and then progressed on, and Councilmember Strickfaden was there at the study session because we asked everybody who was applying for the council position to also attend virtually, and he was there. So it looks like it was quickly done, and I can assure you our hearts were going in the same direction, but we did have discussions over hours and all kinds of other discussions related to what the role of the city is in licensing businesses. And so this was not a real quick and easy deal like you see it today. Also, for the general public, we have an introduction and then we have the final approval of an ordinance. So this is what we call the first reading, and then there will be a second reading. And the purpose of that is in the old days, not everybody was literate, and there were times when the bills were actually read for the first time to an audience and then read the second time for final passage. At the state level, there are 3 readings before final passage. And there's, in the old days when people were not literate, or a lot of people were not literate, they were read out loud all the way along. So we've saved you a lot of time, citizens of Farmington Hills, by not actually reading them tonight. But I can assure you, we put the time in and the effort, and we do hope you take a look at them online. And that's why we do publish our agendas and our meeting minutes all along the way. So thank you very much, Dr. Massey, because you're right. People should know that this is an excellent council, and we all come from different places, and we build consensus on a regular basis, and it's not an easy thing to do, but you have a council that is really working hard together, and I'm very proud to be part of it. Next item on the agenda is consideration of adoption of a resolution regarding the charter amendment for a public safety millage to be placed on the November 2nd, 2021 ballot. We have the triple threat, the chief of police, the fire chief, and our finance director, all moving into position. So which one of you is going first?
I'll do the introduction, Madam
Oh,
Mayor.
no, a fourth one enters the mix.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you. This evening, our team will be providing information for City Council's consideration of the renewal for the 2011 Public Safety Millage and options for proposed ballot language for placement on the November 2021 ballot. Our presentation will provide background on the millage, the staffing and programs it enables our public safety operations to provide, financial information including the renewal options and their respective impacts to revenue, and lastly, staff's recommendation on draft ballot language provided by the city attorney, Mr. Steve Jopik. So thank you very much, and with that, I'll turn it over to our team, if you would. Thank you.
Fire Chief Unruh.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you very much for this opportunity for me to showcase the activities of the fire department, specifically since 2011 and how it compares to current day. So this slide represents some of our activities incident-wise that we respond to from 2011 till current. As you can see, our total incidents have increased from 7,700 to 10,400. As of today, we're on target to surpass 11,000 incidents for this year. Below that, you'll see the breakdown of how we obtain and get to these numbers between medicals, fires, and miscellaneous incidents, which would include citizen assist, where we help disabled residents, fire alarms, prisoner evaluations for medical conditions, and other non-emergency type activities. One of the areas that we're very proud of is that our training hours still remain very consistent. In 2011, we did 25,000 hours of training annually, and we kept that same goal in 2020 and current day. What's remarkable there is the amount of time that we're actually busier responding to incidents, but yet we still hold that same priority of keeping training as a priority. So the fire department is evaluated and critiqued by the Insurance Services Office, or ISO, and they establish a rating based on how your staffing level is, equipment, response times, the ability to answer 911 calls, and the ability for us to train our staff on a routine basis. 1 would be the best, 10 is the worst. Farmington Hills Fire Department is a Class 2 rating. We're just one of 17 departments in the state of Michigan to be assigned the Class 2 rating. So how does this benefit the average citizen? Well, first of all, it provides the assurance that you have a well-trained and well-staffed fire department that has good equipment and able to respond and handle fire and EMS-related incidents. And the other positive is that insurance companies use this ISO rating and assign risk factors, and therefore the citizens of Farmington Hills see a benefit in their insurance rates. We've taken advantage of some federal hiring grants. They're called SAFER grants. And we take advantage most recently in 2015 for the hiring of some firefighters. We obtain about $250,000 per year in support, financial support for these firefighters. After 4 years, the city then assumes the cost of those, assumes the cost of the wages and benefits for those employees. So as the impact to the fire department by losing just 2 firefighters would be the shutdown of one piece of fire apparatus, which we know would be detrimental to our response to calls for service and our response to citizens.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to highlight some of the police department's interest in the public safety millage. The first slide you'll see before you is our Group A crime trend for the last decade since 2011. You'll see a consistent decrease in Part A crime, and Part A crimes are those crimes, 24 basic 24 crimes that are regarded as the most serious to life safety and quality of life overall public safety in our community. And you'll see even in 2020 we had a 4% reduction from 2019, which is the lowest in city history. Next slide, please. One of the things that our community enjoys from our police department's efforts is we are annually recognized as one of the safest cities in Michigan, and that has been going on routinely for the last several years. And last year we achieved the second safest city in Michigan under Mutrix, and then the 18th safest city in Michigan under alarms.org. And a little bit of information on that. There's different data sets that those organizations utilize to evaluate the different cities that achieve the safest city rankings. The second safest city was, we were over 75,000 with other cities of that similar population for our property crimes and crimes per thousand violent crime. In the 18th city, safest city ranking, we were in a category that included cities with as few as 12,000 residents that we were competing against with an 80,000, approximately 80,000 population. And our crime rates were very, very competitive and recognized in that ranking. Next slide, please. Just a few performance issues or performance sets we have here. Calls for service in 2011 were just under 29,000 for the year, 78 per day. I utilized for the current rates a 5-year average from 2016 to 2020. Reason being is last year under COVID, our rates dropped approximately 5,000 calls for service during the pandemic. If that average would have been consistent with the 4 prior years, we would have been right around 36,000 for the year and over 100 per day. Crashes decreased from 2011, average 9 per day to the 5-year average of 7 per day. That's through efforts in traffic enforcement, traffic engineering, and working cooperatively through the city to make our city safer. Burglaries decreased from 319 annually in 2011, or 6.15 per week, to an average of 125, or 2.4 per week. And in 2020 and even 2019, we had registered record lows for burglaries in our community for each of those years, which decreased that significantly. Arrests, as you'll see, in 2011, we were just under 3,500, or 9 per day. In the 5-year average, 2283, or 6 per day. And one thing that we take pride in our department is our quality of training, and we've really increased that even recently. In 2011, we averaged about 40 hours, just over 40 hours per officer, and that was annually. And between 2016 and 2020, we averaged 62 hours per officer. In 2020, we increased that to 82 hours, and this year, 2021, we plan to exceed 101 hours per officer. Next slide. A few notes here. The impacts of reduced staffing. Just on overall service, emergency and non-emergency response, our training, our efforts in training and maintaining our certifications and proficiencies, the investigative capability of our staff, and the technical proficiency in maintaining our investigative and institutional knowledge, our crime prevention efforts, our community policing initiatives, our recruitment and efforts to diversify staff, and staff development and succession planning. I became chief in January of 2020, and since that time, 60% of our command staff has either retired and been replaced. 15 of the 26 command officers in the last 16 months have been replaced. Some of the increased demands on our police department. We are proud to be accredited through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, an honor only earned by 6% of police departments throughout Michigan. Those standards from 2018 increased from 104 to 109 in 2021. We implemented our transparency dashboard. The amount of data, research, collection, and reporting to maintain that increases significantly. Emergency medical dispatching and the training and staffing associated with utilizing the computers to staff and manage that process. Our body-worn camera project, and our which has significant data processing and retention on staffing levels to maintain discovery and the FOIA requests throughout the city. Substance abuse disorder and intervention, the implementation of Narcan, and then our quick response team that goes back and follows up with subjects that suffer from SUDS and experience an overdose. And then our efforts to participate in criminal prosecution diversion programs. Why I say this is these are personnel intensive programs and practices. They can't be done with a technology at all times. It requires significant personnel involvement. Next slide, please. The police department staffing has remained unchanged after the 23% reduction we experienced between 2008 and 2011. Those reductions included sworn and civilian positions, most importantly the 16 sworn positions. This public safety millage, as we've recommended, will enable us to maintain the current staffing levels with no additional reductions. And as you'll see, this public safety millage currently supports 35 sworn officers, 5 dispatchers, and 1 dispatch supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tom Scarola, Finance Director, here to discuss the financial impacts in an overview. First, we want to talk about the total funding sources citywide for public safety, police, and fire. That is split up between the general fund and the 2 public safety millage funds, the 2011 fund, which is the subject of today's conversation, and the 2015 public safety fund, which was originated in the mid-90s and renewed in 2015. As you can see from the pie chart on the screen, the total amount of dollars spent on public safety in the 2021-22 budget is 35.6 million rather, and of that $6 million and a little bit change is funded from the 2011 public safety millage. That is about 1/6. That is the blue slice on top. The general fund does fund the lion's share. That's the yellow portion on the bottom, 23.8 million. Next slide, please. So the source of that funds for the 2011 public safety millage are the taxpayers, naturally, and the bottom blue columns indicate the amount of public safety millage that has been applied each year from 2012, which was the year of inception after the vote in November of 11, the successful vote to pass the 1.7 millage. That millage remained at 1.7 for 4 years and then reduced slightly each year thereafter due to the Headley reduction. The Headley reduction is based on the Headley Amendment of the state constitution that was voted in by the voters of the state of Michigan in 1982. That stipulates that if the community's overall taxable value increases by more than the rate of inflation in a given year, then the community's millage rates or tax rates shall be reduced to offset that additional amount. So starting in, we had a flat situation, a declining situation or a flat situation of property tax growth in 12, 13, 14, and 15. And starting in 16, every year thereafter, including this year, we've seen increases of property values exceeding the rate of inflation, and thus a Headley reduction impact on our millage for the public safety 2011 millage rate. So you can see that's reduced that rate from 1.7 mils in 2015, that was last year, was at a full 1.7, down to 1.6187 mils applied on this year's tax bills. So for all of you and all of the taxpayers of the city of Farmington Hills, they will see that amount, 1.6187, for the 2011 public safety millage this year. The difference between 1.16817 and 1.7 mils, the original amount that they voted into place in 2011, is for the average taxpayer about $8. That is represented by the yellow portion and red line up on top, where the average residential value of taxable value rather is $100,000. So conveniently, that produces a tax amount that is easily calculated by multiplying each one of those millage rates by $100, or 100 times rather. So that derives $170 at inception and $161.87 in 2021. That's a difference of roughly $8 for the average taxpayer per year. So what we are doing, in effect, by asking for the millage rate to be placed back or restored to the 1.7 that was approved by the voters in 2011, is we're asking for something that will impact the average taxpayer to the tune of about $8 per year. That will produce for the city $309,995, estimated about $310,000. That will be sufficient to offset, as Chief Unruh was discussing earlier, that would be sufficient to offset the expiring SAFER grant that we've been relying upon since 2015 to fund multiple fire positions, and that has been up to the amount of $265,000. So the amounts are similar. So we have a happy coincidence here where the SAFER grant is expiring, and we have the opportunity to reinstitute the voters' desired millage rate of 1.7 mils from 2012, from 2011 election, to basically make up that amount and maintain our current level of staffing. Next slide, please. This next slide shows a pinch point, a downward trend, as it were, for a major funding source for our general fund, state shared revenues, which represents fully about 1/6 of our total revenue for the general fund. So you can see that back in 2001, 2002, it was already at about $8 million a year for the general fund. Then the state legislature made a grand bargain at a time when they needed to cut expenditures, and they started to ratchet down the statutory amount of state share revenues, and that had a major impact on cities across the state of Michigan, including Farmington Hills. Then in 2008 and 9 and beyond, you could see the impacts of the Great Recession further negatively drawing down those funds due to reductions in the state sales tax receipts. Then you could see some rebound both from economic rebounding occurring since the Great Recession ended, and also the state legislature did put some of that money back. So you can see that the green line is back up to a little bit higher than where it was in absolute dollars from 2001. However, the orange bars represent what would have happened had there been no legislative cuts, had there been no Great Recession, had there been a steady increase of state revenue sharing based on the consumer price index or our cost of doing business. We would see roughly $4 million more per year. So the pinch on our overall resources is something that the SAFER grants help to backfill. This 2011 millage rate helped to take care of, and as the SAFER grants roll off, then the restoration of the millage will take care of that $300,000 that we're talking about. So if we go to the next slide, please. This analysis handles two of the points. The last 2 points I've already discussed. I'm going to work in reverse. First of all, the $309,995 annually, which will be generated by the restoration of the millage, and then the point above it being the $8 that represents the average taxpayer. And then the question is, okay, well, where does that put our overall millage rate as compared to other communities? Well, compared to 32 communities across Oakland County, that puts us at 18.4441 mills as compared to 18.0857 for these other 32 communities. So right about at the average level for these communities across Oakland County. Next slide, please. That is where I'll turn it back over to Gary to close it out and make the recommendation. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Chief Unruh and Chief King, for your information. Really appreciate it. So I think, excuse me, I think council gets the gist here of the millage proposal. As you know, there are two options that have been provided to council this evening by our city attorney. One is to continue on with a renewal and increase. That's the language that's used in the ballot proposal, to set the millage back to the 1.7 mills, which was approved by the voters back in 2011. The second option is to do basically a straight renewal, which is the lower millage rate that Tom showed you earlier. And the net swing is about a $310,000 swing a year, or about $3 million over the 10-year life of the millage. We had this discussion earlier at study session. Staff's recommendation is certainly to renew the millage back, restore the millage back to where it was in 2011. That will ensure our ability to continue delivering first-class public safety services to our community, and do so in a fashion into the future. And with that, look forward to your deliberation. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
A couple comments. Okay.
Sure, go ahead, Mr.
Thank
Bridges.
you. I just wanted to say that that the city has done very, very well with this public safety millage. You look at the amount of benefits that citizens in this community has experienced because of the millage with the 1.7 millage has been tremendous. When you look at the fact the city has been named a safe city for several years in a row. Chief Unruh spoke about the fact that residents in our community benefit from having the city being rated on the ISO regarding this impact. This has impacted our residents regarding insurance costs, and the fact that we are a safe city that for several years in a row. Even with almost a 25% reduction in staff, the city, our police department and staff has done a terrific job in regards to the city being a safe city. Yes, but I want also to make the comment that the SAFER grant clearly will have impact on our fire department. We'll lose about two firefighters, and with the restoration of the renewal and the increase of taxes regarding very, very nominal. I think we will be able to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think this proposal tonight is worthy of support in regards to supporting the proposed language that the city manager has offered tonight. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Motion?
Yes.
Would you like a motion?
I would like a motion. I would like a motion to reflect a change in the ballot language. For those of you here and watching at home, when Proposal A was passed in 1994, in March, it was a sunny day in spring, the legislature also required that after a Headley rollback, in other words, you pass a millage, and let's say that millage is for $1 million. If inflation goes up 10%, I'm just using numbers because in my mind today with my brain not working well, that would mean that the following year you could levy, that millage could bring in $1,100,000. But if it was going to bring in more than what the inflation rate was, then you had to lower the millage by a small percentage. So even though we authorized 1.7 mils, because of inflation and the way the Headley cap and rollback work, it actually rolls back the amount we can levy to not exceed aggregately across the city the rate of inflation. So that's why we have this roll down. It's not that we intentionally roll it down, but we're required to by law. In addition, we are required when we reset it at what we asked for in the beginning and we want you to renew that, we can't just say it's a millage renewal of 1.7 mils. We have to label that as a millage renewal of the 1.61 and change, plus an increase, which was never designed to be an increase. It was what you authorized already. So we have two pieces of wording that we have to put in under 100 words to explain to the public what's actually going on when they check yes or no on that ballot. And so, Dr. Massey, go ahead.
Well, actually, I greatly appreciate that explanation. And for all of the information that we've heard this evening and we've experienced in all the years we've lived here, public safety is number one, and safety, health, safety, welfare, that's what
we do.
We're up here to do. And with that, I think that our citizens have enjoyed a very safe city, and this public safety millage question needs to be put on the ballot. And I would recommend that we put on the ballot the 1.7 mil question for November 2021, which would have that language of both renewal and of the previously approved and the slight increase. When that comes, when I look at that, I would also, in my motion, include that we do this for a term as we have historically for 10 years. So those would have to be incorporated into the charter amendment ballot question.
I believe you also wanted to say, and the taxes generated are to be used only for purposes of fire and public safety staffing and equipment to maintain the current levels of public safety services.
And in fact, that was something, I'm sitting here wrestling. They would only be used because I was working on the word dedicated. It would be a dedicated village, but for the same reasons, yes, this would be, these monies raised from this millage would only be used for public safety purposes.
Is that appropriate, Mr. Attorney?
Sure. So as I understand, is this a motion?
Yes.
Councilman Massey?
Yes.
So this is a motion to, proposing council approve resolution regarding charter amendment for public safety millage using option 1, which is a renewal and an increase, with a change in paragraph 1, which contains the ballot language that's going to go on the ballot to the voters, and that change is to add the word only between the words used in for in the 6th line of that question in the resolution.
Yes.
Okay, that will suffice then, yes. if that's understood by everybody and is reflected in the minutes, then we're good to go.
Okay. And remember, public, we can only use 100 words or fewer. So,
I'll support that motion, Madam Mayor.
okay. It has been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Bridges. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote, which requires a supermajority of the council.
Correct. Council members Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland, Bridges,
Yes.
Bulaware,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes. And that brings us to item number 14, which is to move into closed session to consider the approval to enter into closed session to discuss an employee-requested review. Please note the council will return to an open session immediately following the closed session to take action if needed and to close the meeting officially. So, is there a motion to move into closed session? Dr. Massey?
Yes, I would so move.
Support.
It's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Strickfaden to move into closed session. All in favor, say
Roll call
roll
vote.
call.
Yes.
It's a roll call vote.
Council members Massey,
Yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland,
Yes.
Bridges,
Yes.
Bulaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now officially move into closed session.
Yes, Sheila.
We've now concluded our closed session and have reconvened for our open session. And during the open session, I believe there is a motion.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I would resolve that the City Council hereby affirms the 2.85% increase for the city clerk based on her annual review as previously approved as part of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget and received by all other employees.
Okay.
Support.
It's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Strickfaden, that our city clerk receive a raise in the same amount as our general employees of 2.85%. And is this a roll call vote?
Regular vote.
A regular vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dr. Massey. Dr. Massey wants to go home to his wife on her birthday.
said happy
It's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by everybody else.
Yep.
This is an up and down vote. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, Farmington Hills. We will